it. If you have any questions, be aware of the masterclass. And the way it normally goes is we have both recordings. So anyone who's new here, Dean as well, you guys will have to go to the Masterclass program channel, which Bjorn so nicely organized. And apparently he decided on Nocturne first, which makes total sense. So what you'll do is you'll click on the link that he posted when it's time, and we will all listen to the Nocturne together, and then we will reconvene here and discuss it. And for those of you who are new, the reasoning behind us listening to it with the links is pretty manifest, and that Discord audio is group audio. So we don't want to have it breaking up, and I could play it through a bot for everyone, but it's destined to lag, and with us being in different countries, it's just not going to work. So we'll go back, we'll listen to that, and then we'll come back in. Please make sure you're muted if you're not talking, and we'll do the Nocturne, we'll hear it, we'll talk about it, then we'll go listen to the Ballade, and then talk about it, and then we'll be done. I would like to put forwards now that Bjorn and I are both teaching this equally, as far as I understand. I'm looking at Bjorn. I think we are. What? I can't hear you. You're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I was saying sure.
Cool. I think a wealth of opportunities and a wealth of opinions is much more valued over one. And if any of you were to miss me talking, you wouldn't miss anything anyways. So
Yeah.
let's begin if no one has any questions. Well, I'll ask, does anyone, oh yes, and please keep the text. So those of you who don't want to talk or don't want to unmute, whatever, please type in the Masterclass text channel. And also during the Masterclass, please keep it related to the Masterclass, not spam. That should be obvious, but it's happened, so gotta say it. All right, if no one has any questions, we can just go listen to the recording and come back. So, Bjorn, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. So what you'll do is you'll go to the channel right above here called Masterclass Programs, and you'll see I just linked 2 videos. So the first one is performed by Samuel. He's playing the Chopin Nocturne in Opus 48 number 1. And that's the recording we'll listen to now. So go ahead and start listening to that recording, and then we'll get back here when everyone's finished listening in about 7 minutes. Okay? You can start listening now.
All right, everyone has listened. Carlene and I listened as well. And Bjorn, would you mind going first?
I was just about to offer, since I know you just came home a little bit in a rush, maybe you want a moment to catch your breath, and I'll go ahead and give some comments. So, yeah, and welcome to those of you who are new. If you also want to comment or ask questions, just do it in the text channel. I think that's the easiest. Samuel, if you're here and you're here, I invite you to go ahead and put your camera on and your microphone on so we can see you or hear you. If you're not comfortable putting your camera on, that's fine, but we'd like to hear you at least.
My webcam isn't working at the moment, but I am fine to speak.
Let me just put your audio on. Could you repeat that for me, please?
My webcam isn't working at the moment, but I'm fine to speak.
Okay, your webcam's not working at the moment. That's fine for me. So what I would like to do first is, I could say, well done. What I would like to ask you is, what is it about this nocturne that you found exciting? What was it about that attracted you to play it in the first place?
I heard Rubinstein's recording of it maybe 3 years ago, and I just sort of wanted to play it ever since. I found it dead cool, I guess.
Right. And more specifically, what about the music is it that you found cool?
I'd say something specific about it would be the returning of the theme in the doppio movement. I found quite interesting.
Right, so there's almost like a transformation of the theme from the first time you hear it and when it returns the second time.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really cool way of composing the music. And I'd also like to ask you, when working on this piece and preparing it for the masterclass and making your recording, what did you find to be the greatest challenge?
I would say accessing a proper piano for recording was probably the greatest challenge.
Accessing a good piano. I can see that being a challenge, and having a good piano is, I would say, actually important for this kind of music that we need to make. But more specifically about the music that we just heard. What was it about the music itself? If there was anything you found challenging about it.
Particularly challenging, I would say the polyrhythms and the double octave runs, because I still didn't really nail the polyrhythms at all.
The double octave runs in the middle and the polyrhythms in the finale, in the
Yes.
third part.
Yes.
Yeah, that does make sense. What I think when I look at this piece, I played through it once in preparation for the masterclass, and what I find to be what just leaps out of the score for me as a chief challenge with this music is legato phrasing.
Yes.
Just would you perhaps agree? Like in the beginning, I think musically the beginning is really tough. If we look at the beginning, for those of you who don't have the score, I should have posted it already, but I wasn't that prepared. But we have, let's see, something that looks like this. So we have this long melody with pauses in between, and we have this accompaniment, bum. And when I look at that accompaniment, I think, ooh, this could easily sound static. This could easily sound monotonous. And then we have the lento tempo as well, so it's a slow tempo. Boom, bum, boom, bum. And when you can listen to a great performance, you can listen to Rubinstein on and the other ones. And what I find that the great performers do in the great recordings is that they have this sense of direction. Even though the score is so barren, there's so little here to work with. We have this very simple accompaniment and a melody that's barely not even there. And they still have, when I listen to them, a sense of direction, a sense of where they're going with the melody. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. And what I find when I look at a score like this and when I play it is that it's so difficult to reproduce that sense of direction, that phrasing, boom, dum, 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 dee-da. If we were playing a string instrument or a wind instrument, or if we were singing, we could develop the tone, right? We could
Yes.
go bum, 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 towards the next one. On the piano, as we all know, we can't do that. And that's, well, you could say that simplifies things because we don't have to worry about intonation or developing the tone. But that's where the challenge also lies. We can't develop it. So how do we create that forward momentum and that phrasing? So that was like perhaps one of the chief things about this piece that really strikes me immediately is how do we solve that? Was this something that you thought about when you performed it or when you practiced it?
When I was practicing it, I listened to Greg Nimchuk's lecture about how the sections are sort of falling down. Each sort of phrase is starting on a higher note and then moving its way down the way. So I did bear it in mind, but it's difficult to sort of execute, if that makes sense.
It's absolutely difficult. I think it's really difficult to execute. So that was, I think that really describes the whole first section is how to make a good legato and how to make good phrasing is sort of the theme for the first phrase, and what it really challenge lies in. I remember Samuel played for us previously in a different masterclass another nocturne by Chopin, Opus 55, number 1 in F minor, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you agree that it's kind of the similar theme or the similar problem for us pianists in that piece as well? Similar accompaniment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember we worked a bit on that also back then on that nocturne, and it seems to be a bit of a recurring theme here for these Chopin nocturnes. So that's what I have. I think that's the main point I have to say about the first one is developing a good tone and developing a good legato singing is about this first section. Do you have any questions regarding? I'll talk about each section separately if that's okay. Do you have any questions about the first section?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Because if we solve that, then it's a bit clearer. The second part, what I call the chorale, because it's written a bit like as if it was a choir. You have these long notes. What do you think is the chief? How to put this question? What do you think is the chief challenge here for us musically?
Would just be have the theme singing out over the other notes.
Or having the melody sing out over the rest of the notes?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring out because you have melody and you have chords in the same hand and you want to bring them out. And then I would ask, how would you do that? We heard you do it, but if you were to describe it in words, how would you bring out the melody?
Let's say apply more pressure to the finger playing the note.
Yeah, you can put more weight on it. You can also use the fingers more actively on those fingers and use less weight on those that you want to play softer. And you can also experiment with the point of the finger where you land at the key, where you strike the key at. So if you strike on the tip of the finger where we have the bone, you get a more direct sound, maybe even you could say a harder sound. I would say a clearer sound is a more direct tone. If you hit with the soft part, you hit on the pad on the finger, you get a softer sound, more mellow, in some way more rounded. And you can always discuss what kind of sound you prefer. I know a lot of people prefer the striking the key with the soft pad of the finger, even when playing melody, because it creates a sort of rounder, nicer tone. But when you want to distinguish between them, that's another tool you have in your toolbox is where do you strike the key? Do you strike it with the bone of the finger or the soft part? Have you tried that?
I have not tried that before, no.
That's something you could try, and you can try that just on a single key, hitting the key with the pad and with the bone, and this works, of course, best if you have a good instrument, like the grand piano that you used for this occasion. If you try it on a digital piano, there will be no difference. If you have a bad acoustic piano, there might be a difference that is so small it's not really audible. If you have a good grand piano, you will hear the difference. That's one of the chief benefits I find on playing on good pianos, like a good Steinway or another good grand piano, is it's not just the smoothness of the mechanism, it's the variety of colors that we can produce using different types of touch. And when you have music that has different layers, which this music certainly does, having that's a bit of my point for the third part. When you have different layers, we need to not only differentiate the layers in dynamics, playing the melody stronger than the accompaniment, but we also have to differentiate them in sound, in color, if that's possible. So yeah, I agree. And also here in the middle section, always look for melody is kind of what I'm thinking. Always look for melody, always look for phrasing, always look for voicing where if there's any interesting voicing in the lower voices, make them happen, make them sound. And because this part is, I think, really difficult to play on the piano. If you had a choir, if you had a string orchestra, we can make this sound really like alive. But when we play chords slowly on the piano, boom, you sort of play it and it's just there, right? And then you play another chord, boom, and it's just there. So how do we create that sense of development, the sense of breath, the sense of phrasing is really, really another chief difficulty of the middle section. It can happen sometimes if you're a little encumbered by the wide stretches. Like this is not technically easy. When played well, this chorale sounds easy. But for those who study the score, you'll find that the intervals that we have to play here are massive. Massive intervals in these arpeggios. And it's easy to become overcumbered by the boop, 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 boop. So that's another. I think you have a little more to work on here just to make them as smooth and as effortless as possible. Some pieces of music sound cooler when it sounds difficult, if it's made to sound impressive. This is not one of those. This should sound like it's not any technically difficult at all, even though it is. And that's the hard part. Those are the parts we really need to master technically. Do you have any comments on the second section?
Yeah, for the octave runs, I feel like my left hand is generally very tense and it doesn't keep up with my right hand. So,
Okay.
would you have any advice to sort that?
Let me briefly look at the video again, because I admit I didn't study your technique that detailed for the middle section and the octaves. Let me just have one moment. It doesn't look that bad to me, to be honest. It might seem as though you're doing pretty much the same thing. You're using a similar technique in the right hand and in the left hand. That's what I'm briefly looking right now. If Matthew observes anything different, he can comment on that. And if not, you don't have to comment on that right now. But you said you found it a little. Would it be a good idea to switch touch, which part of thing within one piece? Generally speaking, yeah. No, about the octaves, I didn't see anything specifically wrong, but you were saying you were a little tense with the octaves?
Yes, it felt like my sort of right hand was a lot more easily played than my left hand.
Okay, can I ask you where in the left hand did you feel tense? Was it in the hand specifically or more in the forearm?
I'd say sort of around the wrist, sort of.
Under the wrist. Okay, that could be I won't say for sure what it is, because what the tendons that we have here are passing under the carpal tunnel, and it's the tendons of the fingers. So is it the wrist that's tense, or is it the fingers that's tense? It could also be the positioning of the wrist. If the wrist is in a bad position, typically like this, it will, and if we then tense the fingers, it will create tension on the carpal tunnel. So if it's this area, then that might be what's happening. But to give a real proper analysis, I think I would have to see you in person, or to see the left hand from a different angle, because right now, since you're filming from the right side, it's a little difficult to see exactly what your left hand is doing. Maybe Matthew and I, this is a separate subject, Matthew and I are planning to have some piano technique deep dive conversation, going really just super detailed nerding on piano technique. This would be a good question to resume in that conversation that we're about to schedule, how to play octaves. So I'll bring that to as a note, and we'll try to answer that in greater detail later. I see Jank asked the question, would it be a good idea to switch touch which part of the finger hits the key within one piece? I would say it's a good thing to do within a piece where you want to create different color, if you want to create a different sound. And when we get to the third section, I think that's something we really not just want to do, I think we have to do it. When we get to the third section, before I jump to the third section, there's one more thing I want to say about the middle section. When you start playing the double octaves, so we have this beautiful chorale going on, and then the double octaves moving chromatically, boom, 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 boom. It's sort of a new element, isn't it?
Yes.
Emerging and creating chaos, or creating something different. I have two questions for you when we get to that bar where the chromatic octaves enter. The first one is, why do you choose to lift the pedal?
So I think it doesn't quite carry on from the previous section, so I wanted to create sort of differentiation that's moved on to sort of something slightly different.
Okay. And that's fair. I'm not gonna tell you not to do it. I just wanted to know if you had a reason for doing it. And the second question, maybe you already have answered it. The second question I wanted to ask you is, why did you play it so loud? Because for me, we have the chorale. It's all quiet and serene and peaceful, and then you enter the double chromatic octaves, and immediately it sounded quite loud to me. And I just wanted to ask you, is that on purpose? Is that your idea, that you wanted loud?
I think I tried to have it louder than the chorale section, but I didn't quite mean to go that loud, if that makes sense.
Okay. And that's okay if that's what you want. I'm using the Schönmud edition, this yellow one. And maybe this isn't the best edition, and you're free to argue that's a bad edition and I should use a different one. But I'm looking at this, and it says in the chorale pianissimo, and when the octaves enter, it doesn't say any different dynamic. It says there's a crescendo hairpin, but it doesn't say a different dynamic. And then in the following bar, it says piano. So I'm looking at this and thinking we're still in the piano dimension of dynamics. I'm thinking we have here almost 2 pages, 1.5 pages of these chromatic octaves and the descending runs and the ascending runs. And I'm thinking we have so much time and so much space later on to be loud and dramatic. I'm thinking, and you're free to interpret it in your way. I won't, if you really insist, I don't want to take away your musical ideas if you really believe in them. But when I look at this, I would immediately think a bit of the opposite. I would try to subdue the entrance of the octaves. So I have the chorale. The chorale is still going on for a few bars, isn't it? Rum bum 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 bum. Dum dum. Rum. Bum bum. So the chorale is not finished yet. So I would like to, my idea, and I'm not saying it's the right one necessarily, but another possibility to consider is finish the chorale. Then you can unleash the bum 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 bum, and then you have an entire page to bombard octaves on and on and on. But when they enter, we haven't really unleashed the demons or unleashed the octaves fully yet. The chorale, the choir is still singing. There's obviously something lurking in the darkness, but it's not yet overtaken the chorale. So that would, if I were to do it, I would still insist on playing the chorale stronger until the chorale sort of finishes, and you have this gigantic chromatic ascending scale. A few bars later, you arrive at this fortissimo and you have the trill, and then the descending runs. That's when I think I really unleash all the power. But if you do it too soon, then there is something about fortissimo and loudness. If we do it too soon, then we don't really have anything to scale on, and there's a lot of climax building here for another page. And if you already start that in forte, then you don't really have that much dynamic range to scale into for the climax. Do you understand?
Yes.
So yeah, I like when I see, okay, there's a climax on the next page. How much dynamic room do I need to build that climax? How much dynamic room do I want to build that climax? And if I can, I start in pianissimo. If I know I'm going to end up in fortissimo on the next page, if I can start in pianissimo, I will, just so I have a huge dynamic range to explore as I get there. So that was the second thing I wanted to say about the middle part, is how you handle those chromatic. Also here, not just dynamics, but also color. Can I, that's what I'm asking myself playing this, can I make the chorale sound like a different instrument than the boom, 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 the chromatic thing? Of course, we're playing all of this on a piano, but as long as those two things are two different musical ideas, I want them to sound different. So then again, you can explore what we discussed earlier. Touch, where do you hit the key on the finger? Weight, how much arm weight are you placing into the keys? And what was it again? Yeah, action, how active are your fingers? Are you using more of a muscular activity, or is it more sloppy and just relying on the arm weight? Those are some of the things you can explore. Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions regarding the middle section that we haven't covered yet?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I'm gonna go ahead to the third section, the doppio movimento. I agree with you, this section is really cool. And I love hearing the main theme return, but in a more developed way. What do you suppose is, I'm gonna ask you the same question here. What do you think is the greatest musical challenge in this section?
I'd say the two challenges are letting the melody sing out over the chords and making sure the polyrhythms are correct.
Yes, I agree, absolutely. And the polyrhythms are, I'm not going to talk so much about the polyrhythms, because polyrhythms are polyrhythms. We just got to figure them out and then do them. I don't really have that much else to say about them. But the other point, making the melody sing above the accompaniment, which is, in a sense, what we've been talking about from the beginning. In the beginning, we also have this subject, how do we make the melody sing? And one way we can do that is practice singing it. which I would recommend every pianist to do. But here it's even more difficult, isn't it? Because the accompaniment is more dense. And the melody is not really any more dense. If the melody was in octaves or anything, then that would help us a little bit. But no, it's still pum 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 pum. It's still the same melody, right? But we have so much more going on in the accompaniment, so much going on in the orchestra, as I might call it. And now the challenge is not only how do we make the melody sing, but how do we make the orchestra or how do we make the accompaniment not drown the melody? And the obvious answer is, well, we have to play the melody louder. And I would agree, but I also think it's another important part of the equation is we have to play the accompaniment softer. Would you agree?
Yes, yes.
Because of the simple reality that if we play a lot of repeated chords, pum 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 pum, and we play the melody, pum. If we play them about the same strength, we're going to hear a lot of the chords and we're not going to hear much of the melody. If we play the melody stronger, we're going to hear it still. But if we play pum 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 pum, our attention will go to the accompaniment because we hear it. It's very audible. If we want to bring the attention to the pum pum and not lose the attention because it goes pum 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 pum, like our attention goes to like a ping pong ball between the melody and the accompaniment, we have to subdue the accompaniment even more. And that is, I think, my main feedback on the third section is I would like to hear you subdue the accompaniment, the middle layer, even more, as much as possible. That will help you bring out the melody just by a matter of balance. If depending on the piano you play on, that might not be so easy. I've played on some pianos that have terrible dynamic range, where it's almost impossible to play really pianissimo. So depending on the piano you have, that might be an almost impossible task. But it seemed you had a good piano, so if possible, explore your dynamic range even more.
Right.
Do you have any comments on that?
And that's good, thank you.
I think that's my biggest takeaway on that section. Yeah, just subdue the accompaniment as much as you can. Do you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me a lot of Rachmaninoff. I played a little bit of Rachmaninoff, and he always does this. We're always dealing with 3 layers at least, and there's always this bass roaring in the bottom of the piano. And then Rachmaninoff typically has this really dense texture of arpeggios or lots of movement or repeated chords similar to what we got here. And then he has the melody, and the melody is just long notes, Rachmaninoff style. Poo, poo, poo. And while you're doing this, you're doing bum, 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 bum. It's so difficult to make the melody, to bring the melody out and to let the melody sort of float above all this bombardment in the middle of register. It's really difficult, and the only way I know to do it is to really subdue the accompaniment. So if it says forte, that means forte for the melody, but not for the accompaniment. It's a bit like if you're conducting an orchestra and it says forte in the score, it doesn't mean forte for the trombones. Okay, it doesn't mean forte for the brass section. It means piano. Like it's a bit like that. You have to really layer the dynamics in order to bring out those elements that you really want to bring out. Pro is saying you can bring out the melody by using this location. I think that's a joke if I'm reading him correctly. I think it definitely is a joke. Yeah. I think those.
Not a joke.
Sorry, Matthew, I couldn't hear you.
It's all good.
I think those were my main comments on the Nocturne, Samuel. I would like to invite anyone else to ask questions or comments, and I would, of course, like to invite Matthew to share his thoughts if he has anything else to add. But before we do, Samuel, is there anything else you'd like to ask me?
Yes, actually, just in the middle section again. After the chromatic runs, the jumps to the big chords, do you have any advice on how to make those jumps more accurate so I can hit the notes after the jumps?
The notes after the jumps. Let me look at the score again to be absolutely sure what you're talking about. And I don't have bar numbers, unfortunately. Is there a way you could direct me to specifically where you're asking?
Don't have bar numbers.
I'm sorry, my internet just disconnected me and reconnected me to Discord. Again, so where exactly did you refer to in Discord?
I'll send a photo of my score just now. I am talking in Masterclass text. I'm talking about bar 43 on my score.
Okay, bar 43 on your score. Let me open that. Yeah, that's the middle. Oh yeah, those chord notes. Rum pa pa pum pa pa pum pa 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 bum bum. Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
So how would I more accurately hit the chords after jumping from the Fs? Because I tend to miss notes or get the wrong things. Is there any way to improve the accuracy of the jumps?
That's a good question, and that's like a problem to discuss in and of itself. How do we make accurate jumps? One method, or I've tried several different methods, and I like all of them. Is my camera not on? Let me turn on my camera. Okay. There are multiple methods you can practice them, and I like all of them. One of them, this was brought to my attention by Josh Wright, who I think is a marvelous teacher on YouTube. And he suggested you practice leaping from the chord the position that you're leaving, and then landing in the next position but not playing the keys. So I'm playing this one, and then moving to the next position but not playing it. And I'm just controlling to see, am I moving to the right position? Am I moving to the right position? Do I need to adjust my movement? And then even without even playing the next chord, you just practice moving to that position and then playing it. So that's, you control the movement, you measure it. That's one way of practicing it that I found help with jumps. The other one is to practice blindfolded. I close my eyes, I play this, I move, I keep my eyes closed, and I just see, is this the distance? And I try to memorize and measure the distance blindfolded. Some jumps we can look at, but some jumps have to be played so fast that our eyes cannot follow the movement of the hand. And in those cases, I find that if I try to measure the movement with my eyes, and if I try to look here and look here, because I need to go from A to B, I can do that slowly. But sometimes we have to play faster than the eyes can direct the movement. And in those cases, I find that if I try to look at the piano, I slow down my movement. I'm restricting myself to the movement that I'm restricting myself to the speed at which I'm able to control the movement visually. So by practicing blindfolded, it's super awkward at first because you're going to miss, and then you're going to miss, and you're going to miss 10 times. But then I practice it eyes open, and it's so much easier because I'm training the muscle memory instead of relying on my vision. So that's another tip that I really like. I'm going to give you a third advice, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but I do. I practice what I call leaping like a frog. So if I'm in position A, I'm going to contract my fingers and contract the wrist a little and create this little upward momentum. And then while my hand is in mid-air, I'm going to completely relax it. And then I'm just going to land wherever I land. And you can practice that on a table or on a... I wouldn't practice it on the keys initially. I would practice it on a table, just that jumping motion. And then I will practice, if it's a short leap, I'll practice leaping to the position I want to land in. So I'll contract my fingers to create an upward momentum. I'll contract my wrist a little, create an upward momentum, leap, relax the hand, and see if I can land in the position that I want to arrive at. And if I measure that correctly, with a little bit of practice, I can sort of catapult or pivot myself into the landing position. And I don't even have to control the landing, because the trajectory is decided by the force which I jump with, if that makes any sense. This is an advanced technique, and I'm not expecting you to get it, but I'm just mentioning it because this is a third technique that I use to practice jumps, and it works for me. Maybe this is a technique I'll discuss in greater detail later with Matthew in our technique conversation. I think that would be exciting. Yeah. Yeah, those are my 3 strategies for practicing jumps, I think. Yeah. I think Matthew is eating. Is that right? If you're eating, I'm not going to interrupt you, but do you have anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the course of me speaking for the past 2 minutes, I ate an entire bowl of rice. So, yeah, at this point, with concerts and music and practice, Colleen can attest, I eat when I can. Also, welcome, Greg. Hi. It was a surprise for show up by Craig Williams. For any of you who don't know, Craig is a dear friend of mine. He's the organist, choir master at West Point Chapel in New York, and he's a wonderful musician. So,
I don't think I've said hi to Craig before. Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
You can? Okay.
But
Now we can.
We can. We're just finishing up the nocturne, and you've arrived just in time for the performance of the Ballade.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll just add a few comments. Bjorn, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Samuel, do you have anything that you specifically want to ask me, or just general feedback?
I'd say just general feedback.
Okay. Bjorn did a really wonderful job saying and giving feedback. He covered rhythm. He covered phrasing. Oh, no, he covered a type of phrasing. I'll get to that in a second. He covered a type of phrasing. And he covered technique in the chorale. He covered a lot of really great stuff. And so what I'm going to do quickly is build off of what he said. And so I'm really big about content. And you might ask, well, what does that mean in the score? Or in terms of music? Well, I'm asked, content is, obviously what goes into it. And what goes into it is, ironically, and actually, I want to politely disagree with Bjorn on one point he made, and that in his statement about the score being barren. I actually think the score couldn't be more rich. And the score gives us clear directions on how to play. And as well as if you know the content within the piece and how the content was formed, how the content was made, why it was made, then we can answer a lot of important questions. And I want to point out, Sam, hopefully, do you have your score in front of you, Samuel?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. So if you look, and if anyone needs a score, I posted the link to it. Chopin Nocturne Opus 48 #1. It's in the Masterclass text channel. It's on IMSLP for free. You can choose your own edition. In any case, I want to preface by saying that, and Pro may disagree with me here, but he's wrong if he does. I have to troll him a little bit. And that is that Chopin's tradition comes heavily out of the classical period. Chopin had four primary influences. He, first of all, was heavily influenced by John Field. For any of you who don't know, John Field was, quote unquote, I say quote unquote, the inventor of the nocturne. He wrote a set of 18 nocturnes, of which they're lovely, they're beautiful, they're very different than this, and you should check them out. They're definitely easier, and they're much more based in nature. They're actually Schubertesque in several ways in how strongly based in nature they are. And John Field was a pupil of Clementi. And of course, Clementi and Mozart knew of each other, read about each other, and then Mozart was a direct influence in Chopin because Chopin studied Mozart deeply, and then later on Bach. And so, and actually, fun fact, he taught Bach out of the Czerny editions, which makes us wonder how he would have played Bach. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. The phrasing in Chopin's music is very deliberate. So Bjorn was talking about the length of the notes. What I want to say is that I think it could go for a bit quicker of a tempo and an absolute acute detailing to the phrasing. And what I mean by that is that notice how the first two notes have no phrasing. It's not an accident. And I want to ask you, Samuel, if you think critically about this, from what you know about phrasing, from what you know about music, why do you think the first two notes have no phrase? And there's no really right or wrong answer here. It's completely open-ended. What do you think?
They're just supposed to be played straight as they are on the page.
Well, but what does that mean, though? Because look at the left hand. The left hand has a staccato mark, and the right hand doesn't. So I mean, what does that mean?
I'm not sure.
It's important because those first two notes set up the entire piece. And not only that, would you happen to know what doppio movimento translates to in English?
Speed.
Double the speed of what? It's not double the speed of anything. Double the speed of what?
The original movement.
Double the speed of the original movement. But it's, or actually no, double the speed of the previous movement. That's what it translates to. However, in this case, it does not mean the octaves. It means obviously the melody. And I don't think anyone would disagree about that. And so we have to think about tempo in relation to the entirety of the piece and say, okay, well, if that's going to be twice the tempo and agitato, what is lento going to be? Not only that, how can we create movement in lento? And I start by saying that this is not the Mahler period. This is not the Bruckner period. Lento is not actually that slow. It's slow, yes, but it's not that slow. It's not Mahler writing lento. It is Chopin writing lento. And so when the classical composers write phrases, they write them to show you, and this might be an obvious statement, but it means something different. They write them to show you specific direction. So the first note of the phrase in classical phrasing, especially in Mozart, always has an emphasis. It's where the down bow, and it's actually in the German, if you'll excuse me, I forget the German word for it, but the German word for this thing means down bow. It means down bow for classical phrasing. And so you have this down bow on that G, on the second measure, and then the line goes all the way into the C at the end of that phrase. So within that phrase, there is not hardly any alteration of what's going on. And some editions actually have tenutos written over the first two notes in the right hand, which is an obvious thing if you know about classical phrasing, but if you don't, it helps the listener know that actually, and this is really interesting, in classical phrasing, in classical period phrasing, I'll add, when a note did not have a phrasing over it, it was played for approximately, half its written duration, which lines up with the staccato in the left hand. But also because there is a pedal marking in the left hand that ends up becoming more portato. Portato is Italian for it means to carry. It literally comes for I forget, it's portate, I think, is the verb in Italian, which means to carry. It's like you carry a groceries, you're carrying something somewhere. And so here we have a portato right hand. And so the sound actually carries over into the rest. And so, but we don't necessarily play the note for the entire time. The diminuendo into the rest grows from the pedals, and we achieve this lifting, heightening effect from the way that we time it. So there's this great attention to detail that Chopin writes in classical phrasing here, and he gives you all the answers what you need to do. So, for example, tom, 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 di da 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 dom, yom ba bum bum bum. And notice too that Chopin actually does not write another pedal marking on the two left-hand notes at the end of the phrase. Those are meant to be cut short. Yum, pum, dum. Because these octaves in the left hand are kind of like bells. They're like big tolling bells. And if you're on a Pleyel piano, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say that they really do toll like bells. And it's really remarkable how they sound. So I urge you to, and I'll leave it at that, I urge you to, and there's tons of, and Pro can supply this, he has a library on his computer, documents on classical phrasing, how Mozart phrased stuff, how Clementi phrased stuff, and then how that would have directly affected Chopin's writing as well. And so I'll leave that where it is. And again, Bjorn did such a good job. I wanted to talk about tempo again. Tempo was what was my biggest fuss in this, is that tempo relationships are obviously extraordinarily important. And so he writes in the chorale section, well, first of all, he in the opening section, he writes mezza voce. That means half voice. So imagine it like a poor beggar, you know, it's very weak. It's mezza voce. It's you have bells tolling and you have this half step in the melody is the first thing you get. So it's like but the beggar's so weak he can't even get out a full sentence. You know, he's stumbling with his energy to get to find words, and then he finally finds it. So it's picturesque, but it's also the details are on the paper in the music. And so when that applies the contrasting section to the poco più lento, he writes sottovoce. And sottovoce is not mezza voce. It's very different. Sottovoce is a whisper. It's under your voice. So here, and actually this is written in treatises as well from this time, when Chopin writes sottovoce, is actually an indication to use it with a quarter pedal. It's an indication to use the left pedal on the piano. And so here you would tap or push down the left pedal, and really you just want warmth and breath to this. But then again, it's still a chorale, it's still a march, and people have to be able to sing to it. So yom yom jim ba bum tom. And notice here that he writes phrase marking as a pickup. So yom yom bum ba bum jim bum bum jim bum ba dum ba bum yom yom. I think it's way up there. I can't sing anymore. But the phrase marking, I mean, you don't have to do any kind of rubato, any kind of slowing down or speeding up. It plays itself there. The phrase, you just watch where the phrasing starts and ends and create your shapes that way. It plays itself. On the big, the one and only, the giant C major rolled chord, the one that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 voices on it, there shouldn't be a delay there. Yum, pom, bim, pom, da, yum, rum, bum, ba, bum. As hard as it is, and as technically hard as it is, and I heard Bjorn and you talking about its technicality, there still shouldn't be a delay because it brings attention to the rolling rather than the melody, which makes it an item in and of itself, and it's not part of the larger picture. Skipping ahead, the same thing applies to the octave section. So there's still this idea of a tolling bell. There's still this idea of a tempo here. Yum, pom, pim, pom, ya da 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 dum, yum, bom, yum, da 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 dum, yum, da 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 yum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It's still the same tempo. And again, the phrase markings actually tell you yum da 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 dum, where to have a little bit of time at. As well, I would encourage you to pay attention to the details of the dynamics, which create the drama. You actually started crescendoing a lot in these sections from a forte, when actually for the first three systems, excuse me, we crescendo from pianissimo and piano only. So it never starts louder than piano. And even and think about this too, that piano on a Pleyel is probably pianissimo or even pianissimo on a Steinway. So when you're playing this on a modern grand, you need to be very, very quiet. And actually, now this is my opinion. This is not a fact. The sotto voce is never indicated in this nocturne where to be lifted, which makes a very interesting conversation. So I would personally lift it at the first indication of the molto crescendo. That's where I would lift it, because then we really have to start getting out of the warmth and into this growing, breath, which then we can which also helps and aids the difference between the crescendo and the molto crescendo. So, but that's just a suggestion from me. That's not a factual thing. And again, in these octave sections, and you referenced the Rubinstein recording, which I was so glad to hear. That's the first recording I ever heard of this piece when I was really young, and it just inspired me greatly. And I'll reference Rubinstein. If you listen to Rubinstein, he doesn't really take much time with the octaves. Their octaves are still in tempo until the last set of octaves with the high E. He goes yum bum 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 bum. And notice here that the retardando. So actually, one thing that you did, which really, I think this credits this section, is that but you had good intentions, and I really admire the intentions, and I think the view needs to be shifted a little bit, in that you actually carried the ritenuto, which is written above the octave E. You carry that all the way through until the doppio movimento, rather than noticing the sforzando acceleration marking. So he has his ritenuto into the sforzando, and then because we're not expecting it, it's a surprise. And so when we actually retard into this sforzando, and then all of a sudden we take off. But notice this, it's so peculiar. We take off into a diminuendo. How much does that happen in music? It's not very often. So we take off into the diminuendo. So this is one of the hardest things on piano, especially on modern pianos, which is why, and Pro will agree with me on this, I despise playing modern instruments. Unless the music is like 1940 and forwards. I essentially just don't want to touch a Steinway. It just does not do it justice. To accelerate into a diminuendo, to pianissimo, we're not going to anything, to pianissimo, again, pianissimo on a Pleyel. It's not pianissimo on a Steinway. Very different sounds, very different dynamic levels, which is about 4 Ps on a Steinway. So we're accelerating into this, and it's almost impossible. I mean, this nocturne requires feats of technical impossibility, and I say that in the truest sense. To pull this off at the highest levels of music making. And so I talk to you in that sense and in that way, believing 100% that you have the ability to do that and that you can do that, which is why I'm sharing that, this stuff with you. And so the agitato in this actually comes, and I've talked to Pro and Bjorn about this. The agitato in this comes from this rarely brought out thing in Chopin's music, which is oppression. And this is especially found in the Ballades, which we'll talk about very soon. The oppression of material in Chopin's music is the most agitato thing that we ever hear in his repertoire. Because whenever we have these most tense moments, it's always pushed and pushed and pushed. It's just pushed and shoved down. And when you're oppressing something and you're caging it up, it ends up building this momentum that is like, it's like shaking, it's vibrating, it gets almost going to explode. And then of course finally it does later on. But in terms, you were asking about, how to bring up the melody here and how to shape this earlier. Well, notice that this is the first time that Chopin uses what's calling, and I'm not counting the octave section, by the way, I'm counting the melodic sections. In that this is the first time that he uses what's called in performance practice infinite phrasing. Nowadays, I'm not sure if it was always called that. And what I mean by that is that he has one long continuous phrase over the whole system, and you have all this material. I mean, it's just stunning. And so you're like, well, how do I make that one phrase? Well, in the same way, the Chopin actually gives you the key to doing that phrase in the left hand. Notice the phrasing in the left hand. The forward motion here is actually driven by the left hand. So Chopin's brilliant in that he gives you the answer. He's like, you want to know how to propel this forwards? Look at the left hand. The left hand tells you how to propel it forwards. And so because the melody is in the accompaniment, the notes in the accompaniment, the enharmonics, especially on modern instruments, which you're playing on, actually carry it in our ears through the rest, even when you're not playing it. So it's like this kind of miracle in a sense. I mean, it's such brilliant writing. I think it's on par with Bach's writing. I mean, it's absolutely genius. And so the key to this section is to maintain that pianissimo. You have to be absolutely sotto voce, absolutely quiet, and keep it very interior. And the only dynamic change you have, the very, very first one you have, is 1, 2, 3, 4 systems later when you have piano. But it never goes past piano. It doesn't get past it. When it says crescendo, you have to look, you piano, you crescendo a little bit, and then you come right back on the piano. It doesn't really go past mezzo piano. That's the point. And finally, with crescendo, I notice that he's hesitant. It's pianissimo to piano and back. It's just a little crescendo, and then it's one step forward, one step back. And he's doubting, and then it's building, and then it's building. It's like a pot that's simmering, and then finally it just erupts in this giant, amalgamation of all the materials happened. And throughout all of this, there still needs to be a really, really solid tempo. And what Pro said was not actually out of the question at all. In this time, it was very customary for people to roll chords, have displacement. Displacement meaning that the melody is separate from the accompaniment. Bum 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 pee, bum 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 bum. The melody will come in this case, a little bit after the accompaniment. And I would ask Pro to share some documents about HIP Chopin here as well in the Masterclass text, if he wouldn't mind doing that. I know we have several of them for Sam to read later, and also Jank about the Ballades. So my big thing here is I really encourage you to dive into the content of the music, because it truly, definitively unlocks things that we could have never imagined before. And my last thing, and this is a personal note, this is a very personal note. This is not in my score. The very last system, we have this I'm saying quasi for a reason, quasi-operatic recitative. And my edition, which is, well, I have 2 editions of this, but I'm using my crappy one to write in because I don't want to write in my first edition score from the 1800s, is that my edition, my Schirmer edition, which, and they published several revisions of this one. This particular Schirmer edition is the 1915, sorry, not the 1943. And the 1915 Schirmer edition has no stoppage to the pedal marking. So it's really interesting because if you look at the left hand, it's all C minor harmony. And diminuendo y calentando. So obviously we're getting quieter and we're slowing down quite a bit because calentando is bigger than retard. And so the pedal, according to the 1915 Shermer edition, never gets let up until the last three chords. So, and I like that, and that's what I do when I play this piece. And I've never performed it, and I've only halfway learned it. I've never learned it to perform it all. So if you ask me if I've learned it, my answer is normally no, but I've played it, not in a performance. And when I have played it in my own settings, I have never let up there. I followed the score here. And I quite like the effect. It has this beautiful, and I'm talking on Pleyel, again, you have to think context, context, context. The way that music sustains on a straight, strong 1835 Pleyel is a whole different beast than how it is portrayed on the Steinway. And if you do this on a period instrument and you hold the pedal out, you have this beautiful Beethoven Opus 110. You know, this is not a 31 A flat major. The Adagio section, you have this beautiful Beethoven-esque kind of quote here, if you will, of this beautiful, and whether or not he knew it, I have no idea, but it's Beethoven-esque in that sense. That he has this beautiful, sustained, fully operatic recitative, which kind of just fades away. Because the entire time, and also one thing you did, which you actually got louder in part of that, the running 16th notes for the last three chords, rather diminuendo y calentando. So when you get to this last three chords, especially on a Steinway, I would encourage you to use the left pedal, the recorder pedal. And with the same sound quality that you did in the chorale section, but a bit darker, just a wee, I don't, take this with a grain of salt, please, a bit more harsh. And the way you achieve that is by, you know, I talked about technique a lot with Bjorn before, but at least in Barbara's technique, you go less from the pads of your fingers and more to the tips. And so you have all your arm weight still there. You're not playing with your fingers, but you just shift your hand position. So the way that the keys are pressed creates a different kind of darkness, a darker tone, and it's just a little bit more harsh. And my justification for that is that it ends in minor, and that it doesn't need the same warmth that the major section had. So that little harshness justifies the minor. I know that's quite a bit of information to take in, but I did that fairly concisely. Yeah, in like 15 minutes of talking. So those are my comments on it. I commend you for learning it. It is by far the hardest of the nocturnes. I don't think there's anyone that would debate that. And the editor to the 1915 Shermer edition agrees, and most pianists I know also agree. So kudos to you for tackling it. And I would implore you to resubmit this 6 months, 3 months, even a year from now. Let's see how it has grown. If anyone has any comments or anything to add to that, who heard the recording, feel free. Otherwise, Bjorn, if you're good, I think we are ready to move on to the Ballade. I add some. Yeah, please, Prof.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a whole lot of information. Just not too much to add. One note that I had myself though was, as much as we talk about the phrasing that we need in the right hand, you also need to think about it in the left hand as well, and just do a lot of just left hand only practice, I think. And also, I think when you pedaled when you pedal, specifically in the first section, I felt like bum, dum, bum, bum. It felt up and down. I think it should feel more it's it's going forward. You have that, even in the left hand. And you want to feel that bass line, especially those octaves down in the bass. You really want to feel those, I think, continuing on, and feel that phrase going. And if you track that over the whole piece, and see how it develops, and then how it how it kind of develops and grows, especially in the doppio movimento section. Like you could get that progression going on. You could tell a real story just with that left hand alone. So yeah, I mean, again, there's already so many things to worry about, and like this whole time you have to keep track of this very simplistic melody in the right hand, but that's also very very hard to prioritize. But yeah, I think the left hand is something that I would just point to. That was the one thing I found was missing. I felt when I was listening to it myself. Um, yeah, I think just keep going, and yeah, just I think just the technique in general. I think that's on top of all the musical ideas, just doing a lot of slow practice, just getting the technique down. I mean, it's really hard. It's thick, lots of octaves, lots of big chords. Yeah, don't try to go too far ahead of yourself and try to implement all these beautiful ideas that Bjorn and Matt have talked about, and just and in some ways you want to also just approach it in your own organic way as well. So feel free to take risks, and feel free to just keep asking more questions, and just keep practicing slow. And yeah, it's gonna be beautiful. It's gonna be beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Well, if anyone has no more comments, I'll reset this for Craig Williams that the links to the next piece, the Ballade recording by Jank, who's here in the chat, is in Masterclass programs. If you look where our little names are, it's 2 channels above that. It's just Masterclass programs, and it is the Ballade one performed by Jank Master Link. Just click on that, takes you right to YouTube. Please make sure you're muted, and then we'll listen to it as we always do. Come back here, reconvene, and talk about it. So let's go listen to the Ballade. All right. I am going to see this here. Seems everyone's done. So I'll come back here. I have to admit, mid-performance of that, I went to go switch scores from the crappy Shermer one to my first edition Chopin scores, which I have about half the complete works of Chopin in. And they're indispensable, I'll tell you that much. But in any case, having a nice score helps. So Bjorn asked me to take the hold on. Asked me to take the wheel. Okay, so Bjorn, do you want to say anything and leave, or do you want to comment after I comment? How do you want to handle your tiredness, Bjorn?
Yeah, I don't have a lot more energy right now. I want to say good job with the ballad. I think you did a really good job, and I'm gonna trust Matthew to give the feedback that you need.
All right.
If that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work earlier, and Bjorn, you're a wonderful teacher as always. And you're free to go to sleep if you want. It's 2 a.m. I get it. In Norway, it's later, so if you want to go to sleep, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll linger a little bit and probably leave discreetly soon.
Okay. So Jank, where do you start with a piece like this?
Yeah.
This piece is infinite.
Yeah.
It is the most vast of the ballades. It's the most poetic. It is the most. It's this ballade, even though it starts on the forte. I can't help but be reminded of the Beethoven Fourth Concerto. You know, it starts with this. It's like it comes from infinity. It's like the music has always been playing. I mean, it's just stunning. But I want to start with a dialogue. So this is a massive piece, as you can attest, as I can attest.
Yeah.
I am absolutely appalled that. So for those of you who know about my Erard collection of pianos that I'm going to have, in 2 weeks they're going to be sitting right here where these chairs are. But until then, they're chairs. So unfortunately, I hate that I could not just hop on my piano and just demonstrate what I'm saying, because it's a piece like this. It begs for literal demonstration rather than verbal. However, I want to ask you, Cenk, we had really wonderful dialogue and voice chat. We shared thoughts about, what you heard there, and with Bjorn and everyone else. So you know where I'm coming from in this piece. I know where you're coming from in this piece. And so I want to have a dialogue about it, actually, which is interesting. And I want to let you take the wheel and and ask me questions, and just ask me questions, and let's see if I can answer them.
Okay.
What do you want?
Okay, so I guess I should just start with the beginning. Starts heavy. I feel like at the beginning it's kind of funny. There's not, like, at the intro, the Largo section, like, there's not really much of an idea, like a central idea, if that makes sense. Like the key from the first few bars, you can't even tell it's like G minor. So technically speaking, from a technical perspective, I feel like this section is actually quite difficult, because it's like, it's so simple. Like, I have a bit of trouble. I have trouble with, like, the pedaling. Like, how do I make the pedaling seem discreet, if that makes sense? Yeah. And then off to the moderato section.
Whoa,
This part-
whoa! You've already
Sorry.
asked 3 questions. You've already asked 3 questions. I don't want to have to
Sorry.
listen to time. Let's deal with one thing at a time. But those are brilliant questions and ones that hopefully I can answer.
Thank you.
So what is special harmonically about the opening? Where are we tonically?
Sorry?
Where are we tonically speaking?
Tonically speaking, at the beginning it sounds kind of like E flat major.
Mm-hmm. And what's special about A flat major?
4 flats.
That's not very special. What's special about it in relation to this piece? How about that?
It's a good question. Like it's not like it's like say like a relative equivalent like B flat major or something, or like a dominant.
Oh, but there is
It's-
a relative. There is an equivalent.
There is.
Though. Yeah.
Huh.
It's the Neapolitan of the dominant.
Okay, so like what exactly?
Neapolitan.
Like I don't.
Well, the Neapolitan. So how much music theory do you know?
I mean I've done music theory like lessons and stuff, but it's like I haven't. I don't know. I've done a bit.
Well,
Like
so a Neapolitan is a Neapolitan key in any really situation is the key a half step above tonic. So if you are in C major, C major is Neapolitan is D flat major. It's a half step up.
okay.
And then the Neapolitan normally always goes to the 5 to resolve. And notice the entire end of this largo, I'll put it that way for now because I don't want to spoil the next section. It ends in the 5th.
Yeah.
It's hinting at 5. And so we're all over the place harmonically. And then we end up going to 4, which is C minor. And then we arrive on 1. Then the third of 1, B flat, lingers. And then it's completely destabilized by that low D down there. And then we find out that it's a 5 chord. And then we're in 1. So it takes... Chopin here is you're right. There's no clear objective in mind. Which is why, and if I may be so bold, which is why to say you have the right idea, and you have the right idea that is unsure, but the way that you played the opening sounded like not as though it was definitively unsure. I'm making this distinction, but rather that you weren't sure how to play it.
Okay.
It sounded like you were questioning yourself. So I challenge you in this. What is to say that the opening is not an improvisation? And improvisations are free, right?
Yep.
They're being made up in the spot. Yeah, you're improvising this. The beginning is really an improvisation. And I'll never forget, all of you must watch this. Christoph Zimmermann, the famous pianist, has a masterclass on YouTube where he has the student playing Ballade 1 play it as dramatically as they can. Now, I'm not talking about, fast and loud, as timeless as they can. He said, and with different pedalings, with doing a quarter pedal. And I'll be fully honest with you, there's no one right or wrong way to play it. It truly is an improvisation. But what I can tell you it is not is dum bum 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 bum. It's not. The notes are not equal. They're just not equal.
Okay.
And as well as that, you heard me earlier talking about classical phrasing.
Yeah.
Notice the phrase marks here.
Yeah.
There is direction to this. So it's improvisatory, but it's also purposeful. And that's the two adjectives that I would encourage you to keep in mind when you play the opening is improvisatory but purposeful. There's a purpose behind it. And that is that we're going somewhere. To answer your pedal question, your third question, there are many different ways we can do this. And I want to preface this. It depends on the piano you're on. And that goes into substrata of model, upright, grand, whatever, forte piano. It's a whole slew of things and dependent factors. Secondly, apart from the piano, depends on the room you're in. Are you in a concert hall? Are you in your house? Are you in a recording studio? Where are you at? Are you in a chamber music hall? Where are you at? It matters. Are you in a stone cathedral? Because Barenboim gave a concert of Schubert in Westminster Abbey, and when I tell you that it sounded like slosh, you couldn't hear a note because it's a 10-second acoustic essentially. So acoustics matter. So where are you at, and what piano are you on?
Yeah,
and that's where musical judgment comes into place. I will give you a tip. I'll give you 2 tips to help you for when you are in larger spaces. When you are in smaller spaces, you can use more piano, more pedal. Half pedaling and quarter pedaling are always really helpful. And they make a big difference, especially on full-size grands.
Yeah.
So if you're in a big space, I encourage you to half pedal the entire thing. If you're in a very big space, you have 2 options. If you're in a huge space, you have 2 options. You can either choose, and this is up to taste. There's no one right or wrong way to do this. You can either finger legato, which is completely legato using the body weight and transferring weight to the keys, or you can pedal it. Now this is where it gets complicated. This might be the one you want, maybe. But by the way, I'm judging that you asked the question. Doing the finger legato, but adding a pedal change every note. So you have finger legato that does not use any pedal, and then you have finger legato, which changes pedals every note. And the reason for that is justified by the fact that it adds the spaciousness to the sound. So you get the thickness of the sound you want, but the clarity of the finger legato. And that's kind of the trick up my sleeve for when I play Chopin, is using lots of finger legato, but actually using the pedal in the finger legato and changing it like faster than you can imagine. And also bringing in idea number 1 of quarter pedaling and half pedaling. You don't have to push all the pedal all the way down. And a lot of times when you're doing finger legato, and this is getting really specific, so this is where I hope you practice a lot, because this gets down to knowing your piano well, which is third pedaling. My personal favorite is to do third pedaling, and you pedal a third of the pedal in a large room, or even in a medium-sized room, and you use finger legato to do the 95% of the work. So those are my answers to your questions about the opening.
Okay.
And I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
What?
Yeah. I said food for thought.
Food for thought. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, I want to hear you guys' questions, but then after that, I want to hear what you envision this piece is, or what it's about, what it means to you, why you learned it. I want to know all that too.
Okay. Personally, it's like I wanted to learn this piece because it tells such a story. It's funny because like usually a lot of this piece I can't really say one exact emotion that I feel because it like changes. Like this section has this feeling, and then it changes throughout the piece. So it's almost to me like telling a story or some sort of adventure. at the beginning, it's kind of at the beginning, like the largo, the moderato, before like any fortes or anything like that, anything dramatic. It's I feel like it's kind of like a wandering, somewhat like just wandering type feeling.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wandering toward. Here's a question though.
Mhm.
We have established in the beginning now, improvisatory and purposeful.
Mhm.
So your wandering adjective that you described could not be more perfect. It absolutely is wandering. The question is, people who wander end up having a destination.
Okay.
So where are we going to wander to?
Do people wandering like have a destination? Because like you don't know where you're gonna go, kind of thing, or
I can tell you that in music, absolutely, because it's a composition. It's not an improvisation. So because the nature of the piece is a composition, it was sit down, thought about, planned, and written out. There is a structure to it.
okay.
So while the opening may be as if someone is wandering, they are not wandering aimlessly.
Okay.
Maybe a better word for it is searching, because when you're searching, you have a certain goal in mind.
Okay. Yeah. I see what you mean.
Yeah. So maybe the opening, and I mean, look at all the distances and the playing with time here. I mean, you have G da G da G da dum bum bum bim bum 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 da G da G da dum. I mean, you have that couldn't be more searching.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so dramatic. So that's great. So we're searching. So we've established just this idea that it's improvisatory and it's purposeful. Now the purpose has kind of shifted into searching. So in regard to this kind of first 2 pages of the Moderato section, do you have any questions about it?
Not really. Although I looking at the score. I did notice the that at the beginning, like this accents, and for the there the first note of each one has like a longer note value. So I don't think I actually noticed that, and I guess thinking out loud here, I feel like for future it might be a good idea to like consider like holding that. What do you think?
Yeah, I do, and especially if you're doing the finger legato and half pedaling, especially that. And I want to point out to you that now this is strictly my view of the piece. You may not agree. You may not think it's even remotely the case. But you heard this when I was playing it for you in the voice chat today. We're talking about, and that is that. It's the heartbeat.
Yeah.
It couldn't be more like a heartbeat to me, and so I would encourage you to, when you're playing those inner voices, those inner melodic fragments, motivic fragments, to think of a heartbeat, and also even more so, what is the term when you have the slur marking under the dots, as we have here? What's the term for that?
When you have the slur marking under,
The
could you give an
dots.
example, please?
Yeah. Moderato section, second measure. The accompaniment part.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you call
From I'm actually not too sure, but from what I from what I remember, I feel like it might be like a kind of like a sticky legato. Although I don't know the formal name for it.
what I talked about in the nocturne? It's portato, to carry.
I see. Yeah.
So there's a still distinction to notice that those markings are not actually pedaled. Notice that. There's no pedal marking for those.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I encourage you to watch your usage of the pedal. And that was one thing I had is that in this time, pedal was way less used. Like I can't even describe to you how much less. Probably 70 to 80% less. They used pedal.
Mm-hmm.
It was a decorative ornament. The pedal was as though a grace note or a trill is. It was to add substance where substance needed to be added. And Chopin is many times very, very explicit about when he wants his pedal markings. And I have here the first edition in which he actually oversaw this publication. And so this is one of the few first editions of music that's actually right, is this first edition of the Ballades. And he has explicit pedal markings where he wants them, and explicit pedal markings where he does not want them. And where he does not want them, he was a huge proponent of finger legato.
Okay.
Yeah. So I encourage you to explore ways that you can use more body weight and more arm weight to create your legato and less pedal.
Less pedal. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any questions in this section?
To be honest, not really. That is definitely the heartbeat idea, and the less pedaling definitely seems like something I could explore. Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk about, and my wonderful fiance will come over in a minute and talk about this too. She has some thoughts she wants to share. She's a cellist. She's wonderful. But in any case, I want to talk about the left hand, because the left hand part really holds a lot of the juice in this piece, especially when the right hand has the runs. And I want to talk about the climax of the first section of 8 notes in the right hand. We have da-dum, the D to the G octave. Ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum.
Yeah.
The left hand should be the primary voice there.
Okay.
And when I say that it should sound like crashing thunder, it should sound like Zeus just broke down your front door.
Okay.
There should be a lightning bolt of Zeus's thunder coming to zap you in the butt. And you play this. Like, there's no other way around it. It has to have that gravity, because we have gone from wandering, and where have we wandered? We have wandered into a treacherous thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And it is not pretty. It is not pretty in the slightest whatsoever at all. And so that goes back, if you go back even more, so do you see on, it's for me the second page, but in the moderato section, you have those 6 tuplets. You see that? The 3 groups of 6? I don't have measure numbers.
What measure?
I don't have measure numbers. It's just in the moderato section, before the 8th notes, you have the 16th notes in that one measure. It's the only measure that has 16 notes in it. Those.
I see. Yeah.
Those things.
Yeah.
Where it says a tempo after that, left hand has its own motive, which derives itself from the classical period of Mozart and Clementi and of the people, and they had different characterizations of things they did, and that's what they're called, characterizations, and those are sounds. They're called sospiri. And it says, it's a sign of the tragedy to come. Literally, is what it is. It's a sign of tragedy. And so we have this wandering now. And we're kind of finding ourselves wandering into the clouds. You can kind of see the clouds, the dark gray clouds of the storm coming over. And we're kind of the dark forest, and then you have this. I mean, it's crazy. And what's brilliant about this is the way Chopin evokes the classical period, their drama, Mozartian drama. That is, when you have the first eighth notes, do you see that before the left hand has the D to the G, you have those open fifths in the left hand? Da-da-dum. You see that?
Yeah.
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 That is explicitly a Mozartian horn call. That's what you see in Mozart symphonies. That's what you see in literally all of Mozart symphonies. And you see it in Beethoven symphonies. You see it in Schubert symphonies. You see it in Schubert's music. You see it in Chopin's music. Scriabin uses it later. It's everywhere in this time. And so when you have that symbol, that is the storm. The storm is coming. Dum bum bum. You have the call of the hunters, the call of people warning the village that the storm is coming. And then when as soon as they warn the village, dum bum bum, ta-dum, the lightning strikes. And so it needs to be, the left hand here needs to be absolutely dominating. It needs to be treacherous, and it needs to be clear. It was not clear because there was too much pedaling. Notice how he takes the horn call, because I want to talk to you compositionally. Notice the horn call motive is the exact motive used at the end of the eighth notes to transition into the minamoso. You see that? Bum bum bum, bum 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 bum.
Yeah, I see that.
It's evocative of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony already. Pastoral Symphony. You have another piece after the storm. Bum bum ba bum, dim ba bum bum ba bum. And it doesn't need, you don't need to do any extra things to these phrases. You don't need to do much extra time. You don't need to do much extra, no extra phrasing, no ridiculous. You can't do that. So I say it literally when it plays itself. If you sing the phrases, you'll figure out very quickly what you need to play. So, and then as well as that, one of the big quarrels I had with your playing, and you played so many things so wonderfully, and you had so many really good ideas. But one of the ideas that you're welcome. One of the ideas that just doesn't work in Chopin, in my mind, is slowing down at the ends of phrases, because that is not what Mozart and Clementi did, and Chopin derives his phrases from the classical era. My first big example of that is dee da 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 dum bum da da dum. Oh no, wait, hold on. Yeah, dee da 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 dum bum da 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 dee da. Where am I at? Dee da 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 bum bum da da dum. You had this huge, not even a rotunda, but a rallentando there. It was dee da 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 dum bum bim ba bum bum. I mean, I felt like I was listening to Verdi.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's not some dramatic opera. Rather, it's an intimate fairy tale.
Yeah.
And so, but fairy tales are based in reality, and that's why it's so powerful. And so, just simple, and you can never go wrong with simplicity. The more simple, and the more honest your interpretation is of anything, the more effective it'll be.
Yeah.
And notice there, the phrase marking continues with that D. Da dee da 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 dum pum ya da dum. So actually, it's the opposite. Chopin writes an accelerando into the next section because the accent, the time you take, is actually on that G, and it hangs. And the E flat goes right into the next section. Dee da 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 dum. Dee da dee da da dum. Dee da dee da da dum. Dee da dee da da dum. Da dee da da dum. Da dee da dum. And I want to point out to you that da da dee da da dum. Da da dee da da dum. Da da dee da da dum. On the third repetition of that, you have the D flat with the quarter note stem drawn down, and it's accented. See that?
Where? Sorry, could you repeat where that was? Third time. Okay.
Yeah, third time in the right hand part, the D flat is as the quarter note stem on it.
Yeah.
That's the counter melody. And notice the counter melody is carried into the left hand: D flat, C flat, E flat.
Events.
Chopin has a counter melody which fills the two rests in the right hand.
Mm. I see.
And so also another principle of music is when you have the same thing twice, the second time always has to be more beautiful.
Okay. Okay.
So after that counter melody, we have da 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 dum bum, and here's where you take time, da 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 dum bum, even quieter, and then da 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 dum da 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 dum da da dum, and notice again the counter melody.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that level of content. It's all about the content piece, and it's that level of content that is my comment to you for the whole piece, is to know the context behind how he wrote it and why, if it's purposeful, if it's improvisatory, if you're wandering, if you're searching, the difference between wandering and searching, knowing why it's not aimless wandering because of the composition and has structure,
Yeah.
and knowing how he meant his phrases. They're not careless phrases, and it doesn't mean take vibrato. It means to have direction. It's very different things. And knowing where you take time, knowing the romantic rules of repetition, and how these things play out in Chopin's music. And as well, you had a retardando so many times at the ends of so many phrases that it felt like it was 16 or 17 little pieces of music rather than one large phrase in music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the longevity of the piece and the cohesiveness of the ideas that glorify, very important word, glorify the structure of the music, because the structure is the pillars and that's what holds it together.
Mm-hmm.
And when we arrive at a structural moment, we have to know that that's a pillar. Otherwise, it's in vain.
Mhm.
So if we do lots of sentimental rubato, it doesn't work. And that's another thing too, which I think every great pianist, I know Emmanuel Ax, Andras Schiff, Daniel Barenboim, I can go on and on. Alfred Cortot even, they talk about how Chopin is not a sentimental composer. Period. People adorn his music with sentimentality. It's devoid of that.
Yeah.
It's not, Chopin's music is not a reflection on the past. It is a reflection in the present of where he's going.
Yeah.
And that is not sentiment. And sentimentality is what ruins the music of Chopin.
Okay.
And so we have to be looking forward in his music, always looking forwards. And that's the key to Chopin's music, is having this beautiful look forwards. And if you want to know a composer that pairs nicely with Schubert, not Schubert, I keep saying Schubert. Chopin.
Yeah.
But ironic, because I was going to say Schubert is the answer. Schubert and Chopin pair beautifully together. And if you do a concert, their music mixes like bread and butter. It just goes right together because they compose off of the same fundamental principles.
Mm-hmm.
And they both look ahead. Schubert, his whole life, looked towards death.
Yeah.
Chopin looks towards, rather than death, in the short-term context, human suffering, which involves love, lost love. And Chopin was also very sickly as well, which he had that in common with Schubert. So it's sickliness, and then eventually in Chopin's later music, he looks towards death as well. So it's always looking forward. So instead of repeating my same comments over and over and over about where I would just say continue the phrase, my general comment to you is what I said to you before: to continue the phrase, to pay attention to the details, to not pedal where he says not pedal, to pedal where he says pedal, and to think about the specificity of the words that you use in your mind to describe it, because they make the piece.
Okay.
Yeah. And as well as that, if you want to bring into the picture, as I was talking to you about the voice chat, the historical kind of approach to it of displacement, tempo rubato in the Romantic period, other things, I'll just briefly go over those kind of definitions. I've already been over displacement a little bit. That's when you have a melody in the right hand that's offset from the accompaniment in the left hand.
Yes, yes.
Tempo rubato in the Romantic period, and especially in early Romantic, is not what we consider to be nowadays. Tempo rubato in the Romantic period is actually when the right hand separates from the left hand. A good example is the E flat nocturne of Chopin. You add dots, you add time, you detract time. That's tempo rubato in Chopin's time. So, and then also this time, not dissonant chords. I highlight not dissonant, but consonant chords. Roll.
Okay.
So they rolled a lot of consonant chords. And so I encourage you to find chords that are special, which you can kind of roll, but do not bring out the rolling for the rolling's sake. This was done out of improvisation. All this music was done out of improvisation. And so when you roll a chord, it has to be a spur of the moment thing. Like rom, rom. Like it just has to be like, you cannot plan it. It just has to happen. That's how they roll the chords. But not on dissonant chords. That's harpsichord technique, and that does not work on the piano for very different reasons. So those are my comments to you. You had a lot of wonderful ideas. I really enjoyed the clarity and your coda. Your coda was very clear. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And your accents, you had many accents that were, like you mentioned, accents. You had accents that were in good places, and there was a lot of drama in your music. And now I think it's time to take that drama and to focus it down into a specific context so that has structure.
Okay. I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Although that is a lot to think about, yeah.
Yeah, that's not any shortage of information. And so before Carlene's, my wonderful fiance, speaks, I want to ask if anyone on Discord has anything to say before she takes over. So Craig Williams, Mistro, do any of you want to say anything? Please do if you want to.
I could say something very quickly. First of all, I'm just going to say, bless me, Father, because I have a Paderewski edition here. But anyway, but that said, looking at the ballad, I kind of get the sense what Jank is trying to do in terms of the rhythm and in terms of the improvisation. My one little word of advice at this stage, because you've learned it so well, and I mean the technique is fabulous, and bravo to you for tackling this piece and doing it so well. I almost think at this juncture you want to back up. I would almost say the opposite of what Matthew just said, but to get the same goal. And that is to take that largo and practice it in 4/4 time with eighth notes, and really be able to play those eighth notes like eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 1 and 2. And the only reason I'm saying that is because then from that kind of, because I think you're so into the interpretation zone, you want to try to pull it back maybe to being a little more literal. Yeah. And then from there, from that anchor, find where you're going to improvise from. I get a sense sometimes in major parts of this, I don't quite get the sense that there's that anchored rhythm. And so sometimes I lose the core of the structure. And I think when you do that, then you're going to find the ability, if you can play it almost as if it were to a metronome, then you're going to find the ability to then deviate, that's the wrong word, but to be able to go different from the strict rhythm in 2 or 3 different ways. And that's where you're going to find the second way it being more beautiful, because you have such a rhythmic surety. Now, I also want to say in the moderato section, you fell for it. Okay, you fell for Chopin's nefarious scheme. He got you. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. What he did. You talk about longer note values.
Mhm.
You got the C, which has the half note, and then the D, and then the F sharp. You actually need to move through that C, but you're always stuck on that C because you actually see that longer note value and you get stuck on it. But it actually is moving through. Ba-da-da-dum. So you're actually, that's almost a rolling chord right there. Okay? So it has to be bum. So first of all, you have your heartbeat left hand. I want you to notice you don't see it as much in the first movement of the 6/4 moderato, but in the third movement moderato, you're going to see that da 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 dum bum bum be dum bum 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 bum. What's the left hand do? Bum bum. Underneath that da 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 dum. So what happens is you actually have to have that right hand part da 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 follow that left hand heartbeat. So what that's going to mean is that don't get stuck on those open C's, which look so big. It looks big, all right? But you have to go da 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 da. You got to go to the B flat da 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 dum. So almost like my wrist is like da 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 dum. I'm still holding on to the C. I'm still holding on to the D. I'm still holding on to the F sharp. Da 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 da. But rhythmically, you have to think da 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 dee da dum bum bum be, and then 2-note phrase over the bar line. Da, da. And actually breathe on that fourth beat, okay, or that second large beat, since 6/4 is a complex time signature. Ba da 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 dum bum bum be da da dum ba da 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 dee. But what you need to do is move through all that. But every time you play, you're always da 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 da, and so it got a little stuck. But I think that's going to free it up. I think that's really going to free it up, and it's going to make it move forward for you. So I would just do, and then when you get to places like, and I mean, Matthew already went over this, ba-da-da-dum-bum, be-da-da-dum, those 2-note phrases, da-dum. Now, he always, in this piece, he does a lot of the 2-note phrases where that first note of that 2-note phrase is stronger than the second, and yet he's always like putting the strong note on the weak beat and the so-called weak note on the strong beat, and so you have these counter rhythms that really, but it really in a sense allows this piece to move forward. And so I would say really try not to get so stuck on some of the small rhythms, but again, and I'll echo what Matthew said, keep that left hand going. I would also say make sure that when you have the agitato, I've got it in measure 40, which is a few measures after that 16th note. Don't anticipate that too much. Da 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 dee da da da. You know, let it really just, you know, don't anticipate tempo changes too much. And what I would say just overall is when you do have tempo changes or you want to surge forward, is always make sure that you don't lose the actual contact of the note. Okay, really make sure, don't play through the note so much. You still, I mean, I had a teacher once tell me when I did the Debussy or the West Wind, you know, what the West Wind saw, and he actually comes to me and says the most indicting thing in front of the class is, you know, you actually have to play the notes, you know. And I'm like, okay, don't mind me. You don't even have to open the door. I'm just going to walk underneath the door as I leave, you know. But I mean, but that's the way it is here too. When you get into where it really starts going, I know you want to free it up. That's exactly what you want to do. But what I think we need to do is you need to come back to where you're really, really getting in touch with what the fingers are doing on the keys, so that then from there you can see where your tempo deviations are from. And what I would say overall, the overall piece is that sometimes I think the slows were too slow and the fasts were too fast, and so I lost the overall structure. So now that, again, I'm not talking about the con fuoco, that's different. But I am saying that even, especially when you that was almost a little, it was almost too different from what was before. So I think you just need to actually give it more unity. And again, that's going to come from, and I said, what I would do as a practice technique is take certain sections and play them strict tempo. Just play it strict tempo. That's not where you're going to want to go, but I'm saying that if you can just play it strict tempo and then from there decide, okay, now how does it bend? How does it flex? But again, really, really watch. Make sure that you don't get stuck on those open notes, and that you're really thinking through, what the beat wants to do. And then again, saying that, I'm just trying to make some very simple concepts, hopefully to bring the whole piece together for you. But I mean, really, wonderful work, wonderful conception of the work. I know what you want. I don't think you're there yet, because I think you're trying to get at your goal from almost halfway there. Bring it back, allow it organically and naturally from the rhythm then to develop the faster and the slower from there. So that's what I have to say. And good work.
Cool.
Good work.
No, thank you. Thank you, Craig, for that. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
That was really wonderful. Thank you. It's great. I love seeing you just pop into the master classes in my head. I love it.
Well, I had to have dinner with my wife because she's working tonight, but I wanted to at least try to get in when I could. And I appreciate you sending me the notice through Messenger. I appreciate you sending me the notice.
My pleasure.
I'll try to show up when I can.
My pleasure to have you here. We all love you. You've become probably completely to your not knowing is that you've become a legend in the server.
I don't know about that, but whatever. A legend in my own mind, maybe.
Well, I'll give it over to Arlene, and then that will conclude the master.
Actually, may I interject? Briefly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I had a specific question about the very last note that you played, that last G at the very end.
I meant to comment on that.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Because usually like my conception or in how you most commonly hear it is that boom, you just sell out onto that last G. You hit that hit the high B flat and then it crashes down. At least that's kind of how I think of it. So the way you approached it, Jink, was kind of it was kind of like a more like that B flat. You have that B flat, and then that G was kind of more like an echo or like an afterthought or something. So I wanted to know your thoughts on just why you chose to play that note the way you did.
To be honest, I never really like when I learned the piece.
Yeah.
I didn't pay too much attention to that when I was like focused more on the notes. Over time, I just kind of got used to playing that one, playing it less aggressive. Like I didn't mind that idea of I didn't mind that idea, and so I stuck with it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So that's definitely interesting. I think it kind of speaks to the whole. I think what Matt said earlier about you're roaming around, but what is your ultimate destination? I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is a question that you might want to keep thinking about. Like, I mean, for me, like the way the piece ends, it's very dramatic. It's almost like there's maybe a few examples that come to my head. But it's just like a very like dramatic ending where it's just very just super like pessimistic and just like doomsday basically at the very end. Something like that. So but you don't have to see it that way. But that's just something to think about. I think an important thing to kind of keep in mind is to keep that. I think Professor Craig spoke to it earlier, but about like playing, more like practicing more rhythmically. I think also like a thing that helps is to really bring out the dance energy, that sort of dance-like feel throughout the whole piece. Like the piece moves from different kinds of dances to different kinds of dances. And you kind of want to like figure out what kind of dance is being danced at each single part and how to kind of go from one to the other. And I think that kind of thought would help kind of unify the piece, the overall narrative of the piece as well. Yeah, so yeah, but otherwise, yeah, that was yeah, just very dramatic and so much energy, and is definitely was very fun to watch for me. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, keep it up, keep it up.
Yeah, and I would back that Mistro statement by saying that not only is it fortissimo with 3 Fs at the end, but then he says get louder than that.
Sorry, where is
So,
that? At the very end.
The very, very last system. He writes fortissimo with 3 Fs, fortissimo. Then he writes, dynamically speaking, a crescendo. Then he writes, after the crescendo, at 2 accent marks. So we're talking about 4 Fs here, so fortissimo with an accent. And accelerando into that. So, yeah, I think it literally has to be crashing.
I see. Yeah. Because there's no...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, on my edition, I do not see a crescendo at the end, but I do not see like a dynamics change. So yeah, I see what you mean. Like the last note, there could be more of a ooh. Yeah, I do not have that. I poco risonuto and then accelerando.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I see, yeah.
But also,
so that means that last note, yeah, I gotta hit that last note.
Yeah, and then I think it also speaks for musical common sense, which is a dangerous thing to say, but I'm saying it anyways, because if you accelerando with accented octaves that start in fortissimo, I don't think you're going to get quieter.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot speaking for that. But anyways, honey, why don't you take my chair and tell them what you want to tell them? Go ahead.
Okay. Cool. This will be one comment that'll be under 1 minute. My name is Carly Soderberg. Yes, my name is Colleen. I play cello. I do not play piano. Therefore, I don't really play Chopin, but I'm a musician. I have a general understanding of music, and I kind of take what I know by playing my instrument to kind of understand things.
Yeah.
So, I was watching the score the whole time, and in your left hand, especially in the beginning, and it comes back multiple times, there's the it's the quarter rest, and then it's quarter. It's the boom 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 right there.
Oh, it's the second measure in the moderato part of it.
This whole motif, where you have 2 quarter notes, they're each a staccato, they're connected.
Yeah.
Those aren't an actual staccato.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Whenever you're playing cello, if I got something like this, or if you play any string instrument, you always know to go tom, tom. And so it's not ka, ka, it's a ta, 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 ta. And there were points where you did do that, but as your phrases change, as you want to emphasize certain notes more than others, you end up cutting the second one really short. So it's making sure that, yes, the first one can be emphasized more, it could be a more, less, but they should still have that length of a quarter note.
Yeah.
Second. Okay. That's it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's all I have to say for the masterclass. That's all everyone else has to say. And I thank you both, and you'll see this later, Sam, too, for submitting. Thank you for submitting. It's been a pleasure to work with you both, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your night. So thank you.
Thank you. And I was actually going to say,
thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thank you to all of you guys as well. Like, this was my first masterclass, but thank you for the all the feedback. Yeah, definitely very detailed. Gave me a lot to think about. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Most certainly. So
I do have one question though. Just final question just popped up in my head at the very end. The grace notes with the octaves. at like as it like goes down to like the final cadence.
Right.
Like, was I playing that maybe too fast or too slow, or is like
Well, it's dum 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 dum. It's they are grace notes.
okay?
Yeah, they are grace
All right,
notes.
cool.
Yep. But in any case, great job.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. It was great to see you, Craig. And
Yep.
I'll talk to you all later.
All right.
Cool.
Great to see you too.
Good to see you.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right. Take care
Yeah,
now.
and nice meeting you all.
And Mistro, if you don't mind, send me the recording once it's done processing, please. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.